Season number 1 is in the books here in the San Francisco Giants franchise on MLB The Show 24. And today we've got our offseason. This is our first full opportunity to sort of mix things up here with this roster. Coming off of a disappointing season where we won less than 70 games, I think it's pretty obvious that things need to change in a pretty big way. We're going to go through our winners and losers for the studs and duds of the year as voted on by you guys in the last episode. And how we're going to format this offseason is going to be a little bit differently than I've done in the past. Normally, I've been able to fit it all into one episode, but with the introduction of the wheel and doing so much more with the international free agents, we're going to cut the offseason into two parts. Today, we're going to do pretty much everything else, whether it's free agency, contracts, draft lottery, trades, etc. And then the next episode, which will be up, of course, within the next few days, will be fully going over the results of international free agency. So let's take a look at how the Major League season as a whole ended up. We'll take a look at the standings here and then go over the results of the playoffs. The Phillies, Pirates, and Dodgers ended up winning their divisions. Pittsburgh certainly being the most interesting, winning 98 games. And then we had a three-way tie in the NL Central for second place and also the last wild card spot, which ended up going to the Cubs over the Cardinals and the Brewers. Chicago is joined by the Braves and the Diamondbacks as other wild card teams. The AL East was majorly disappointing. The Yankees won the division, but really everybody else in there was really not living up to expectations. The Guardians won the Central, and then the Astros won the West, with the Rangers, Mariners, and Twins as the three wild card teams. So overall, for the most part, fairly chalky across the board with these results. The Pirates winning the Central would certainly surprise a lot of people. Maybe the Guardians as well. Although in real life, currently, they have one of the best records in the league. So let's start with our studs and duds of the year. We'll start with the stud of the year, which, with an overwhelming majority of the votes, ended up being Jun-Hoo Lee, to no surprise, garnering close to 91% of the first place vote, which has to be a record regardless of series, and it's well deserved. Jun-Hoo Lee had big expectations going into the season, but not even I could have expected this. Jun-Hoo Lee was marvelous this year and proved to be worth every penny and then some of the giant contract he got in the offseason, making the All-Star team, winning the batting title, hitting .352 with an OPS at 925 and a WAR at 7.4, which was top 10 in the National League. He didn't win the Rookie of the Year, which is pretty crazy, but he was still unbelievable this year. He'll go up in rating by 3. Normally, I would have him go up in potential by 3, but I will point out, in the actual base roster of the game, he has 93 potential, which is a whole lot different than the 84 we gave him for this series. So I'm going to kind of meet in the middle. We're going to give him 93 potential, like he has in the base roster of the game, but we're not going to move it up any further. That'll be his reward for winning the stud of the year and having such a good season. So now he's got A potential and is looking even better for the future. Blake Sabol ended up getting second place. I think Patrick Bailey was really the guy getting all the hype behind the plate going into this series, but it was Sabol in year one who stole the show. Batting over 300, on-base percentage at 350, slugging at 500. So his rating will go up by 2. His potential will as well. It's now at an 86, which is quite high. Tristan Beck, unfortunately, ended up with 0 votes, but we're still going to have him go up by 1. He had a really strong season for us out of the bullpen, and he was pretty good last year, but I still did not have a ton of expectations for him coming into the season as somebody who was in the 60s overall-wise. So I feel like he deserves a boost. He'll be a 69 overall, and his potential, which is already pretty high for a reliever, will move up to an 81. As for the dud of the year, this race ended up being a whole lot closer, decided by 0.5%. Every vote mattered here, with Luke Jackson barely being the loser over Jordan Hicks. Again, unbelievably close. I feel like Jordan Hicks probably should have been the one who got first place because there was way higher expectations on him coming into the year. But I get it with Luke Jackson. He was getting paid $6 million, which is a lot for a reliever, and he was abysmal. He's had some bad seasons in his career, but he hasn't been bad since 2019. So in rating, he'll go down by 3. His potential will also go down by 3. It's now a D. Luke Jackson's going to be making $5.8 million next year. which is kind of crazy considering he is really not good. I don't think there's any value for him across the league, so we're probably just going to have to keep him. Jordan Hicks ended up in second place. Hicks had been a reliever throughout his entire career with the Cardinals, but he was signed here with the Giants to be a starting pitcher, and he was given big money. 4 years, $44 million. He absolutely did not live up to it. The hit rate went up. The home run rate went way up. The strikeout rate went down. And the walks, which have been the issue throughout his career, that went up. I will say he was better once we moved him back to the bullpen, but I want to give him another chance as a starter because that's what we paid him to do. So his rating will go down by 2. His potential will also go down by 2. His potential still is quite high. It's an 86. So I still have hope for him going forward, but this season was a complete disaster for Jordan Hicks. Blake Snell ended up getting third place. Snell certainly wasn't horrific this year, but the guy just won the Cy Young last year. We had some high hopes for him, and he didn't deliver. The hits were up. The home runs were up. The walks were way up, which has been already a big issue throughout his career, and it amplified this year. The one thing he improved upon was the strikeout rate, which already was amongst the best in baseball. I want him to be a more well-rounded pitcher. It's nice that he struck out over 200 guys, but it's not nice when you're being paid as a Cy Young pitcher and you really didn't do anything well. The one good thing about this is that he's definitely going to opt into his contract next year. So Blake Snell will be back, which I think is a win. He'll return to the top of the rotation along with Logan Webb, but his rating and potential will go down by 1. And hopefully this season is not a sign of things to come for next year. Otherwise, that would end up being a really, really bad contract. Now let's go through our minor league stud and duds of the year. We'll start with Luis Toribio, who ends up winning the stud of the year. He only played about 4 months in AAA, but he was really good. He hit .353, OPS close to 1,000, WAR above 3. His rating will move up by 3. Look at the offensive increases throughout the year. His potential goes from a C to a B, and he goes from kind of a random prospect for us to a guy who could compete to be a starter in spring training next year. Grant McCray ends up getting second place. He had some big league action at the end of the year, but in the minors, he was really solid. He hit for good power, good contact, and had one of the highest WARs amongst all position players in AAA. So his rating will move up by 2. He is now a 71 overall, and his potential will move up as well, looking like a possible solid outfield piece for the future. And our outfield is looking more and more crowded with all these prospects, with guys like Luis Matos, Elliot Ramos, Trevor Larnach, and of course our first-round draft pick this year, Kyler Rodriguez. This is a really good problem to have. The more talent, the better. Brandon Martirano ended up getting third place. He made a push for second, but will get third. He split between AAA and AA this year. In AAA, he was marvelous, hitting .346, OPS above 1,000, WAR at 2 in only like 30-some games. And in AA, he was pretty solid as well. So he'll go up by 1. He'll become a 66 overall. His potential will move up by 1 as well, although I will point out his potential is really, really low. So I don't think this is really going to do much for him. He goes from a 55 potential-wise to a 56. I didn't know you could really be that low. I'll be completely honest. As for the dud of the year, the loser ends up being Luis Matos, who I had high hopes for coming into the year. He made the big league roster out of spring training, but was not very good in limited major league opportunities. And then in AAA, he, again, really was not all that good. He did play well the final weeks of the year, but that's not going to be enough for him. He will still end up being the dud of the year. His potential will go down by 3 as well to an 80. I'm still optimistic for his future. He's only 22 years old, but he's got a lot more work to do than we thought. Will Wilson ends up getting second place. Once upon a time, Will Wilson was a highly regarded prospect in this organization, and his stock has plummeted fast over the last few years, and this season did not help with a WAR at nearly -1 in AA. So his rating will go down by 2, and his potential will as well. It really looked like for a little while that him and Marco Luciano would be the long-term middle infield for this team, and I don't think that's anywhere a possibility anymore. Thomas Scopucky ends up getting third place. He wasn't horrific or anything. He had a WAR of 2.4, but compared to the other pitchers in the system, he just really was not all that good. Factor that in with the fact that he's played big league ball before and was also a pretty highly regarded prospect at one point. So he'll go down by 1. He's now a 63 overall, and his potential will go down by 1 as well to a 73. So those are your studs and duds of the year. Now let's simulate through the Major League playoffs, which unfortunately, obviously, we are not participating in. but it should still be interesting to see what happens around the rest of the league. In the wild card round, the defending champion Rangers lose to Seattle, Minnesota sweeps Cleveland, the Braves get swept by Arizona, and the 98-win Pirates get swept by the Chicago Cubs. That'll bring us into the next series, and in the American League, wild results. The 5 seed and the 6 seed are going to the ALCS. Seattle sweeps number 1 seed Houston, while Minnesota upsets the Yankees. In the National League, the Dodgers need 5 games to beat Arizona, and the Phillies need 5 games to beat the Cubs. In the World Series, we've got David and Goliath. The Dodgers versus the Twins. In the American League, the higher seed has won every single playoff series. There's no way that's ever happened in Major League history. So obviously the Twins are going to be the underdogs here against the Dodgers, but LA is going to be without Mookie Betts, who's hurt for the entirety of the World Series. As for the Twins, they've got some injuries of their own. No Pablo Lopez, no Byron Buxton. Both players have been out for the entirety of the postseason, and Minnesota's still been able to get here as a 6 seed. Can the Twins pull off another upset? They win Game 1, end Game 2. Look at the Twins! Now the Dodgers come back and win Game 3, end Game 4, pivotal Game 5. It goes to the Dodgers. They lead 3-2. The road team has won every game so far until Game 6. The Dodgers have won the World Series. Shohei Ohtani ends up winning the postseason MVP in the NL, while rookie and top prospect Emmanuel Rodriguez wins it in the American League. The World Series MVP ends up being Shohei Ohtani, who's able to add another accomplishment to the unbelievable resume that he's got going. And at this point, if he retires today, he's going into the Hall of Fame. Multiple MVPs, 4-time All-Star. He won a Cy Young this year, postseason MVP, and now a World Series MVP. What can't this man do other than not have his translator steal $16 million out of his bank account? All right, let's move into the offseason now, the fun part of today's episode, and that will start with retirement. We've got one person in our organization, Chase Pinder, who will be calling it a career. Shout out to Chase. He never had a chance to make the big league roster, but oh well. Notable big leaguers calling it a career include Martin Maldonado, Yan Gomes, David Peralta, amongst others. In terms of notable free agents, Nick Ahmed, who started the year on our team, was DFA'd, never got picked up. Jackie Bradley Jr., Jeurys Familia, Zach Greinke retires, certainly makes a compelling Hall of Fame case. Mark Melancon, the veteran relief pitcher, is done, and that's about it. There really were not many notable names here other than Zach Greinke, who unfortunately does not make the Hall of Fame. I feel like he deserves it, but doesn't get in. So now we've got our exclusive rights free agents. There's nobody. Everybody on the roster is under team control, for better or worse. We had a few of these guys going into the year. Amir Garrett was traded. Austin Slater was extended. Matt Chapman had an option. He was traded. Blake Snell has an option. He's opting in. So we've got a few holes on this staff. Bob Melvin was just hired last offseason. He signed a 3-year contract, so I'm not sure why he isn't on the staff. So we're going to give him a 2-year deal just so he can have his accurate real-life contract. And Bob Melvin will be back as the manager, although he is entering hot seat territory, being that the team significantly underperformed this year. As for our new hitting coach, we're going to look at Sawyer Ryan. The +2 clutch rating is what really pops off the page for me. Lord knows this team needs a clutch gene, and I like the +3 power as well. Our team had average power this year. I think that's something that I feel like we should look to improve because we've got some big-time power hitters on the roster. Everybody else here is going to be fired. I want to start fresh. I want to get my own guys in the building. I know we need a really good pitching coach. This is going to be the 1A coach that we hire, and it's going to be Buster Bird. The pitching was really bad this year. It's got to get better. I really like the +2 walks per 9. I think that's the biggest thing with him. Big in home runs per 9 and stamina. We do lose some break from him, but I think it's worth it considering the other areas of his expertise. These are going to be the other coaches we look for our first base coach, third base coach, and then the farm director. With our farm director, I really wanted somebody with +3 contact because I think that's the most important skill for position players in this game, and it can be a little bit challenging to develop. We currently have nobody on the staff, but hopefully that changes soon. And with that, we're going to simulate into free agency with no player contract offers at the moment. And now we have a full staff. Everybody ended up accepting, so the staff is set for 2025. And that brings us into the good stuff. There's the list of free agents. We're going to start with the dirty work. We've got a full 40-man roster, so we're going to trade some players away. We're going to do 3 for, I guess, 2 here. Neither of these guys from the Diamondbacks are on their 40-man, so this opens up 3 spots. We're going to start with Tom Murphy, who was acquired last offseason. He's a good player. 849 OPS in 4 of the last 5 seasons. The guy can hit the ball, but we don't need him. We've got 2 really good catchers already. Ryan Walker's been a solid reliever over the last couple of years. His numbers from this year to last year are scary similar. Nearly the same innings, same hits, same home runs, same walks. The strikeouts, though, were more than cut in half, which is odd, but interesting. And then there's Cooper Hummel, who was also part of the Tom Murphy trade last year. In exchange, we'll be getting Landon Sims, a relief pitching prospect, and Andres Chaparro, a first base prospect. I like both of the guys we're getting, even though we are giving up some solid big leaguers. Tom Murphy and Ryan Walker were both pretty good last year, so I felt like I needed to get something pretty good back, and I like both of those players quite a bit. Now we've got to add some guys to the 40-man. Robbie Ray was not there already, so he is now. He's fully healthy from Tommy John surgery and will compete for a spot in the rotation this year. Carson Wisenhunt is Rule 5 eligible. I don't want him going anywhere, so he'll be added to the 40-man roster as well, and we're going to leave the other spot open for now. On to arbitration. We're going to keep things pretty chalky here. We're going to offer almost everybody with the exception of Mike Yastrzemski. The price for him to come back would be around $8 million. That feels like too much for a guy who really probably wouldn't start next year. Jake Fraley played very well down the stretch. I feel like at this point he's better than Yastrzemski, who had a pretty disappointing season and has just lost his role. We're going to try to find a trade for him, but if not, he'll enter free agency. As for Camilo Doval, I kind of just want to have him extended for a little while. We'll offer him arbitration, but we're also going to offer a 4-year extension for $24 million. This will keep him under contract through his arbitration years, along with his first year of free agency, and he'll get paid again once he's 31. So I feel like that works out well for both sides, getting him locked up now. As for the renewable contract stage, every major leaguer got their renewable deal, which for most of them was around $760,000. And then we're also going to offer about 90% of our minor leaguers their renewable deals as well. There were some guys I didn't offer because they were asking for quite a bit of money, and I just wasn't really willing to give that. And now on to free agency. And this is interesting for a team like the Giants because we're a pretty big market team. We've got a big budget. The Giants' roster building strategy over the last few years has been to build through free agency and adding older players to patch holes in the roster. That team building strategy has not worked whatsoever. Our team of veterans won less than 70 games this year. It's time for a new roster building strategy here in San Francisco, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to spend. If there are guys who I think can help this team, we're still going to look at them. It's pretty obvious that the biggest issue on this roster is pitching. The offense at least had some good moments last year where I feel like the pitching was just a complete disaster. The bottom of the rotation was abysmal. The bullpen had no consistency whatsoever. I feel like we need at least 1, maybe 2 new starters, and we need to overhaul at least like half the bullpen. So I think that's going to be the area that we really focus on here going into free agency. And I kind of had an idea of what pitchers were going to be in the free agency class going into it, and I kind of wanted one big starter. And the guy I was planning on targeting was Shane Bieber. I felt like he would have been perfect for us because I feel like he's got a lot of untapped potential, and he's a guy who's been proven to be really good in the past. The problem is, he's been given the qualifying offer and seems to be wanting a lot of money, and it seems like Cleveland's going to be willing to give it to him. I don't want to shell out a big pitching contract right now, considering some of the other deals we have on the books. So because of that, we're going to look a little bit cheaper, and there are a few options that I think make sense. Michael Lorenzen was a guy I was interested in adding before the season this year. Obviously, the Giants ended up signing Blake Snell instead, but Lorenzen was arguably better. He threw 200 innings. He made the All-Star team for a second consecutive year, and I feel like on a short 1 to 2 year contract, he would be a lot more productive than some of the goobers we've had at the end of the rotation over the last couple of years. So we're going to give him a 2-year deal for $15.5 million with a mutual option for the second year. Another guy who caught my eye was Andrew Heaney. I'm someone who likes to buy low, sell high on players' values, but sometimes it's just an idea to buy high, and that's exactly what we would be doing here with Heaney, who out of nowhere won the Cy Young with the Texas Rangers. He had a career year, and I think that's going to continue. I think he's going to continue to be a good player. Maybe not a Cy Young level pitcher again, but he's not asking for Cy Young money. He's coming off a year with a WAR of 5, but I think him and his agent also recognize he's 33, and he's not necessarily a proven good pitcher. So he's not asking for an absurd price. 2 years, $27 million. We're going to have a mutual team and player option for the second year as well. The last starting pitcher we're going to offer is Jack Flaherty. This is a buy low player. He has a potential, but hasn't been all that good for a little while. He's coming off a disappointing season in Detroit, and what makes me a little nervous is if Chris Fetter, who's one of the best pitching coaches in baseball, can't fix him, can anyone fix him? I'd like to say I can, but I don't know about that. We're going to do a 2-year deal for $11 million. I don't plan on signing all 3 of these guys. Hopefully one of them accepts, and I don't think we're going to need the others. As for the bullpen, we're going to go for a similar strategy. We're going to offer a handful of guys and hoping to get a couple to accept. I think A.J. Minter would be a good choice. He's been a really solid lefty in Atlanta over the last couple of years, and he's a lot better than some of the guys that we've had as middle relievers this year. Going from Luke Jackson, for example, to A.J. Minter feels like a really big upgrade and one that I think we should absolutely look to make. Minter's been really steady over the last few years. I think a 2-year deal for $9 million is pretty fair. He's 31, so he's not that old and should be productive through the course of that contract. Jose Leclerc is a guy who I really like. He's 31 years old himself, and he's been a really good pitcher for close to a decade now with the Rangers. He was their full-time closer this year, racking up 39 saves with an ERA below 2. And I think having him and Camilo Duvall at the end of the bullpen is going to be a filthy combination. He's really not asking for too much money either. I think 3 years, $19 million is really fair for him. The last guy we're going to offer, another lefty, is Matt Moore, who was a very inconsistent starter early in his career, but he's become a full-time reliever and has been really good over the last 3 years. It's pretty obvious that I want to add another lefty. We already offered A.J. Minter, and now we're looking at Matt Moore. So those are the 6 pitchers we're going to offer. Again, in a perfect world, we're probably only going to get 2 or 3 of these guys, but it doesn't hurt to throw some flyers at a couple players. There are a couple position players I want to look at as well, too. Even though I think our lineup is pretty solid going into next year, there are a couple players who entice me. Joey Gallo is such a unique skill set, and I think we can get the most of him in San Francisco at Oracle Park with the right field fence being high, but also really short. I think for a lefty like him, we might get a lot of splash shots into McCovey Cove. Gallo hit .216 last year, his highest average since 2019. Obviously, he hits for good power. He draws plenty of walks. Now he's got some notable deficiencies in his game. He's not a very good contact hitter. His plate vision rating is at 6. That's pretty bad, but we're going to have to take the good, the bad, and the ugly with Joey Gallo. We're probably not going to play him at first. I think I want him in one of the corner outfield spots because he's got a great arm, and we don't have a ton of outfielders with great arm strength. I am also going to look at Max Kepler, another guy who can play the corners in the outfield, another lefty bat. He's a lot more steady as an offensive player than Joey Gallo, lacking major strength, but he also doesn't really have any major weaknesses. He's a solid enough defensive player, and there are no question marks about his game. He's the complete opposite of Joey Gallo. I think getting a 3-course outcome player in Gallo and then just a consistent everyday starter in Max Kepler is going to be a good idea. Now, unfortunately, we don't have enough roster spots for our free agents. The organization is full. So we're going to do some 3-for-1 trades. We're going to send 3 not-so-good prospects to the Twins for Seth Gray, a left-handed hitting third base prospect who doesn't look all that exciting, but he's better than the guys we traded away. We're also going to be sending Blake Rivera and Will Wilson, one of our duds of the year, to the Washington Nationals for outfield prospect Jeremy De La Rosa. We've known that the Nationals are looking to trade one of these outfield prospects for a while because they've got like 6 good ones. De La Rosa's probably the worst of the bunch, which is why they're going to be willing to give him up here. But he does have B potential, and this is a really good value deal for us. We're going to be sending these 3 relief pitchers to the Rangers for Matt Whitley at catcher. He doesn't look all that exciting, but catching depth. It doesn't hurt to have more. So let's do some simulating now. Let's see the results of this free agency. Tanner Scott, the new closer in Washington, 4 years, $30 million. We're going to get offered a trade here from the Dodgers. No. I don't know why we would consider this, but okay. The Twins are going to offer us a trade here. They want Fernando Molina, our 3rd-round pick. I don't think this deal is worth it. I really like Molina as a future piece for us. So here, 2 weeks later, there's no offers left. We ended up getting a handful of the guys who we offered. Camilo Duvall, for what it's worth, accepted his 4-year extension. He'll be joined with some new relief pitching buddies. Jose Leclerc ended up signing his deal, as did AJ Minter. We won't be getting Matt Moore, though, because we don't really need him, since we got 2 other good relief pitchers. Entering the starting rotation will be Michael Lorenzen. 1 year later than I originally planned, but better late than never. So with that, we don't really need Jack Flaherty or Andrew Heaney. As for the position players, we ended up signing both Joey Gallo and Max Kepler. 2 different skill sets to the lineup. Gallo in particular, I don't know where we're going to play him. I don't know how often we're going to play him, but it's going to be interesting. And then Max Kepler as well, adding to the outfield. And now we've got an even more crowded outfield, which again, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Let's do some more simulating now, getting closer to the start of December, where we will reach the winter meetings stage of the offseason. The 40-man roster, though, again, is full. So we're going to take some guys off of the 40-man roster and hope that they don't get picked up. Now, some of these guys like Otto Lopez, we did not offer renewable contracts to, so the decision is fairly easy. We're also going to take off Tyler Fitzgerald, Luke Jackson, the Wicked Witch is dead, and then Mike Yastrzemski, because again, we're not planning on giving him a new deal, so it's not really worth having him there. I was able to find a trade, though. He'll be going to the Guardians for outfield prospect Wilfredo Artunez. Yastrzemski's been a really solid player for this team over the last 6 years, but there's just not a spot for him. Antunez is an intriguing young player with upside. He's only 22 years old. Figured it's worth a flyer. It's not like we were going to keep Yastrzemski anyway. And then we've got another 3-for-1, acquiring catching prospect Eric Yang, because again, it never hurts to add catching depth. We've got some more free agency news around baseball. Teoscar Hernandez will be signing with the Pittsburgh Pirates, so they add to their outfield. But we've got some more NL Central spenders. The Brewers get Gleyber Torres, so he will enter the middle of the infield for Milwaukee. And that'll bring us to the draft lottery. We've got the 8th odds currently. So moving up here, I think, would be a pretty big deal. Throughout the history of this channel, I notoriously have not had good lottery luck, mostly with NBA 2K, since the lottery is pretty new for baseball. But I've never had a team move up. Well, that is until today. The Giants have moved up to the 4th pick in the draft. That's pretty exciting. The lottery results here ended up being pretty funny. We moved up 4 spots, so did the Red Sox, and the Angels, and the Mets. So the teams projected at 5 through 8 will be picking in the top 4, and the teams who were originally slated in the top 4 will get picks 5 through 8. If this isn't the MLB saying, please do not tank bad teams, then I don't know what message they're trying to send. So now the farm system's looking pretty solid. We've got, obviously, our guys from last year's draft, some of the other roster moves we've made, and now the 4th overall pick next year. This system is really starting to come along. That'll bring us to the Rule 5 draft. I didn't think there was anybody I'd be interested in. We don't have any open spots on the 40-man, so with that, we can't even make a pick, even if we wanted to. We didn't lose anybody from the farm system, so that's good. We don't add anybody, but we don't lose anyone either. So with that, we have entered the dead part of the MLB offseason, a 2-month stretch where really nothing's going on other than free agents signing at pretty much random times, because unlike the NFL or the NBA, these guys will take months and months because, well, that's Scott Boras for you. The Braves offer is this deal involving Luis Toribio. I'm good after the year that Toribio had. Corbin Burns signs with the Rangers. He had a really disappointing season with the Orioles, and the Rangers are going to buy low on him. Christian Walker returns home with the Phillies. I guess they don't like the Bryce Harper at first experiment, and they're going to move him back to the outfield. Pete Alonso signs with the Cardinals for really cheap. A trend I noticed throughout this free agency class is that players signed for way under market value, which, I mean, good for the teams, I guess. The Dodgers are going to offer us another trade, Jorge Soler for 2 prospects, including, ironically, Thomas Skalpucky. I'm going to pass. Willy Adames signs with the San Diego Padres, so they're going to continue their roster strategy of only signing shortstops to play positions other than shortstop. Juan Soto to the Reds. Wow. First of all, look at this contract. 6 years, $130? I get Scott Boras sucks, but do the owners hate him that much? What an absolute bargain. He should have been getting, like, triple that. Nonetheless, the Reds' core is even more loaded than it already was, and they finally get their Jake Fraley replacement. Max Fried, meanwhile, signs with the Cubs. Again, total bargain. He should be making at least doubled, maybe tripled this. The owners must have some kind of collusion going on. I feel bad for the players at this point with how little money they're all getting. That's going to bring us to the end of the offseason, and this is really the spot where I like to make trades. I will say, I think the roster's in a pretty good spot. There's really only one guy in particular who I think I need to trade away here, and that's Wilmer Flores. I've been planning on trading him since the start of the offseason. I knew Joey Gallo was going to be a target of mine. We ended up getting Gallo, which means we don't really need Wilmer Flores. I think this is where his value is going to be the highest. He's had the 2 best years of his career in terms of WAR, in terms of home runs, amongst other stats. And at 33 years old, he's gotten better with age. He's somebody who's got a lot of experience, but has really improved throughout his big league career. So I think there's going to be some value for him, especially for a team like the Cubs, who have some okay first basemen, but they could use an upgrade. Alexander Canario and Owen Cassey were the 2 prospects who really caught my eye. I think I'm going to prefer Cassey because he's a little bit younger. Canario's out of minor league options. Cassey's only 22 years old. He's got B potential, albeit that B is only an 80. Last year in the Marlins franchise, the Cubs were always really good. Owen Cassey was somebody who hit in the bottom of their order, but he always made big plays against us. So I'm kind of happy that I have him on my team now rather than the opposition. So with that, our offseason is in the books, other than international free agency, which, as I said, will be in the next episode. Let me know what you thought of our offseason down below. I know it wasn't like super crazy. We didn't make any wild moves, but I think we're in position to potentially make a splash, whether it's a trade or an offseason acquisition over the next year or so, if the team ends up improving. I think the roster is good enough to where we're going to be able to develop the young players we have, but not necessarily rush them in. And hopefully our team's going to be a lot more competitive than it was a year ago. That'll wrap up the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.